I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room when my phone rang, its electronic chime a brutal intrusion into the quiet misery of the clinic. The room was sterile and silent, filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and the low rustle of magazines being turned by anxious hands. It was my only daughter, Angela. Her name flashed across the screen, normally a sight that brought warmth, but today a sudden, cold dread gripped me. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was entirely unrecognizable. It was not the voice of the child I raised, nor the woman I had comforted. It was the voice of a CEO delivering bad news to a negligible employee. It was precise, devoid of warmth, and utterly surgically cruel. "Mom, we're going on a trip to Europe tomorrow," she stated, without a single preamble or greeting. The sheer audacity of the announcement left me speechless. Then came the series of blows that felt less like words and more like physical impacts. "I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye." And she hung up just like that, a dead dial tone replacing her final, dismissive syllable. The void she left resonated in the quiet room, a sudden, deafening silence that contained the sum total of her betrayal. 45 years. I sat there, counting the years in my mind. 45 years of sleepless nights, of prioritizing her every need over my own, of financial and emotional sacrifice poured into her life. And she had summarily dismissed me, the architect of her existence, as easily as one discards an old newspaper. Yet astonishingly, the immediate reaction was not tears. It was an unnatural, crystalline calm. As I stared at the phone, a slow, deep smile started to form on my lips. It was a terrifying smile, a smile of profound, quiet knowledge. Because in her haste, her greed, and her utter lack of compassion, Angela had overlooked one monumental, life-altering fact. She didn't know the whole story. "My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71 years old, and I realized in that plastic chair that the woman my daughter had just robbed was not the frail, weeping widow she assumed me to be. The preceding 6 months had been a blur of grief. My world had fractured when Robert, my husband, passed away. It was sudden, too fast to grasp. He died from a massive heart attack while we were sharing our ritual breakfast, just as we had done every morning since 1970. That final morning, he had followed the precise routine: freshly brewed coffee with just the right amount of cream for me, 2 slices of perfectly toasted bread. He had leaned over the table, kissed my forehead, and with that beautiful, gravelly voice said, "Good morning, my love," his last perfect words. Since the funeral, Angela had been a constant presence, a silver-tongued shadow. She handled the paperwork, escorted me to the bank, and even insisted on attending my checkups. "Mom, you need to take better care of yourself now that you're alone," she'd say, her eyes wide with what I had genuinely believed was filial devotion. I now saw the calculated strategy behind that performance. She wasn't caring for me, she was monitoring the assets, ensuring the path was clear for her grab. The beach house was the cruelest theft, it wasn't merely a deed. It was the physical embodiment of our struggle and our success. Robert and I bought it when Angela was a difficult, demanding 15-year-old, scraping together years of savings. Every family memory, Angela's high school graduation, Christmas dinners, the quiet anniversary where Robert read me a terrible, sweet poem, was sealed within its walls. She brought her boyfriends there and eventually her dreadful husband, Edward. I cooked, I cleaned, I maintained the sanctuary. To her, it was simply cash, and the car, Robert's Ford pickup truck. He treated that vehicle like a silent extension of himself. He washed it every single Sunday, religiously, changing the oil himself and parking it under the exact same spot beneath the ancient oak. Angela knew that truck was the last sacred relic of him I possessed. I swore that if I leaned close enough, I could still catch the faint, familiar scent of his aftershave mixed with oil that lingered on the driver's seat. She had sold his memory for their European adventure. As I sat there, utterly alone in the waiting room, I searched for the tears that refused to come. Instead, a profound realization dawned. a single blinding memory that cut through the silence. 3 days before his death, Robert had appeared in the doorway of the living room, holding a thick, yellowish manila envelope. Antonia, put this in the drawer of your dresser, he instructed, his tone unusually serious. If something happens to me, open it after a while, but only when you feel ready. Do not look inside until then. Overwhelmed by daily life, I had tucked it away without a thought. After the funeral and the deluge of paperwork, the memory had been utterly buried by grief. But now it surfaced, pristine and commanding. It was waiting for me. The nurse mercifully called my name. I floated into the examination room, nodding absently as the doctor pronounced me healthy, advising only rest and good diet. I smiled the empty smile of a woman whose mind was already elsewhere. It was fixated on that envelope, on the coldness of Angela's voice, and on the serpentine influence of Edward. He had always despised me, seeing me as the guardian of Robert's sensible economy. I left the office and walked to the bus stop. The loss of the truck was immediate and jarring, a stark symbol of my supposed destitution. Yet, as I waited, the smile deepened into a quiet sense of destiny. My daughter thought she had left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and an old address, but she was wrong. Robert, my careful, meticulous Robert, had always been the man who planned for the weather, the man who prepared for the storm. The bus arrived. I took a seat by the window, watching the endless stream of indifferent humanity, houses, stores, hurried, anonymous faces, all carrying their own private battles. I too was carrying a secret, a heavy, magnificent weight that was about to shatter my life and irrevocably change Angela's. I reached home, bypassing the kitchen, going directly to the dresser drawer in our bedroom. There it was. The manila envelope exactly as I had left it. My hands, which had been so steady earlier, now shook with a fine electric tremor. I could feel the weight of the documents inside. Robert had written my name across the front in his clear, disciplined hand. I settled onto the edge of the large bed, the air thick with the memory of him. Outside, the last light of day was draining away, filling the house with deep, comforting shadows that suddenly seemed less lonely. I opened the envelope slowly, pulling out the contents with a ceremonial reverence. What I found inside instantly pushed the memories of grief and betrayal to the periphery, replacing them with a surge of astonishment so overwhelming it felt like a wave breaking over me. There were stacks of legal documents, impeccably organized, property deeds, corporate certificates, brokerage statements, and nestled at the very top, Robert's final letter. My eyes swam with hot tears as I read his familiar, measured prose. My dear Antonia, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I know this will be a shock, and I apologize for the secrecy, but I wanted to protect you from worry and complication while I was alive. Over the last 20 years, I did not just drive a bus. I invested every spare penny we saved in properties and businesses, quietly, anonymously. We don't just own the beach house. We have 6 other multi-unit properties, including the entire 20-story apartment building where Angela and Edward currently reside. We also hold significant shares in 3 major regional companies, investments that are worth substantially more than you can imagine. You are rich, my love. You always were rich in spirit, but now you are rich on paper, too. I stopped breathing. The papers slipped from my trembling hands onto the quilt. The 20-story building where Angela and Edward lived, the structure she considered her lavish home, was mine. Robert had operated in complete silence for 2 decades, routing everything through a holding company I had never heard of, a company of which I was now the sole, undisputed heiress. Robert, the quiet, humble bus driver, had been a financial titan in hiding. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. My daughter, in her greedy attempt to steal what she thought was a small inheritance from a vulnerable old woman, had just sold a fraction of her mother's fortune to fund her escape from her mother's secret tenant. In the long, cavernous silence that followed the shocking discovery, I reread Robert's handwritten letter dozens of times, the words becoming etched into my memory like a sacred text. It was more than a financial revelation. It was his last, deeply philosophical testament. He meticulously explained his rationale for the extreme secrecy, a decision he knew would puzzle me, but which he had undertaken out of a profound parental love and fear. My dear Antonia, his letter continued, I know this burden of secrecy is heavy, and I apologize for the worry it caused. But I made these provisions not just for financial security, but as an act of emotional preservation for our daughter. You and I know Angela, and we know her heart's tendency toward the superficial, especially when life comes too easily. I saw the way Edward influenced her, the way she increasingly prioritized status over substance. He paused in the script, then emphasized his core motive. If she knew the full extent of this money, I feared her character would be completely corrupted, her drive extinguished, and her genuine appreciation for the simple things, for family, for hard work, for you would vanish entirely. I wanted her to value us, to value you for the love and stability we provided, not for the material possessions or the eventual inheritance. I want her to find true love and respect, not just transactional relationships bought with our sacrifice. The sheer heartbreak of his foresight was overwhelming. Robert's efforts to shield Angela from the corrupting influence of easy wealth had, in the most terrible, unintended consequence, created the perfect scenario for her most cynical tendencies to bloom. She had only waited until she perceived our poverty to execute her betrayal, validating every single fear Robert had harbored. The truth was a devastating verdict on the value system we had failed to instill. That night's sleep was utterly impossible. My mind refused to shut down. It was a relentless, buzzing engine of analysis, strategy, and painful recollection. I paced the house ceaselessly, the floorboards groaning under my quiet agitation. My fingers traced the edges of the old furniture, the worn sofa, the heavy dining table, the very pieces Angela had recently scoffed at as dated, urging me to finally update my taste. I saw her disdain now, stark and clear, realizing she wasn't criticizing the furniture. She was criticizing the assumed lack of funds that kept it there. I spent hours staring at the family photos on the wall. I fixated on one, a picture from her 5th birthday, where she sat perched on Robert's lap, her small face radiating pure, uncomplicated joy, her hands sticky with frosting. I tried with agonizing effort to reconcile that innocent, dependent child with the cold, transactional woman who had executed the sale of my life. When did the shift happen? Was it Edward's predatory influence, or was the seed of self-interest always there, dormant, waiting for the right moment to sprout? My overwhelming grief for Robert, which had been a dull, constant ache, was now suddenly galvanized into a sharp, clear determination. The chaotic sadness was gone, replaced by a crystalline focus on the immense, complex task ahead. I knew I had to fulfill Robert's final wish, but the fulfillment required confronting the very entitlement he feared. Merely handing Angela the truth and the money would only confirm that entitlement. She would learn nothing beyond the convenience of a safety net. No, I needed a better way. I realized that my purpose was to orchestrate an internal transformation for her. I needed her to truly confront the absolute, searing consequences of her selfishness. She had abandoned me to the illusion of poverty. I would use the reality of my wealth to guide her through the necessary suffering. I would let her fall until she learned how to stand up without expecting a rescue. My strategy was fixed. Silent observation, silent maneuver, and ultimate shocking revelation. The very next morning, before the coffee had even finished dripping, the phone rang again. It was Angela. Her voice had perfected its final, unbearable transformation. It was soft, excessively kind, and dripping with thinly veiled condescension. The precise, patronizing tone reserved for addressing the frail, the elderly, or the slightly incompetent. I gripped the receiver, my jaw tight, ready to play the role. "Mom, how are you really coping, dear?" she began, stretching the false concern until it was nearly transparent. I wanted to let you know that we executed the transfer this morning. We deposited your share of the house and car sales into your old bank account. It's truly not much, of course, but it will certainly help you cover your minimal living expenses for a few months while you look for something smaller, a more suitable space for a woman on her own now. I allowed my voice to thin and tremble slightly. My share, I asked, playing the confused, pathetic widow she expected. What exactly is my share, dear? Yes, Mom, we looked out for you. We obviously weren't going to leave you destitute. Edward and I decided that 30% of the net proceeds was a very generous and fair distribution, considering Edward's absolutely vital business needs. We truly require the bulk of the capital for this European investment. Edward has secured an absolutely incredible business opportunity in the financial sector over there, Mom. It's truly life-changing for us, and you know how much we deserve this chance. 30%. Her calculated percentage of my own astronomical assets, her self-serving presentation of the insult as an act of profound mercy was staggering. I let the silence hang, absorbing the full weight of her moral bankruptcy. I see, honey. And what time is your flight? We are leaving this afternoon, Mom. Our bags have been packed since midnight. We anticipate being away for at least 6 months, perhaps longer, if the business successfully takes off. But please, please don't worry about the future. When we return, we promise to help you secure a small, safe apartment. We'll find you something that truly fits your needs now, fits my needs. The phrase was the final, stinging summary of her perception of me. She was defining my entire remaining existence based on her assumption of my insignificance and poverty. Okay, Angela, have a safe trip, be well. Oh, Mom, I just knew you'd understand. You've always been the most compassionate soul. We love you so much, Mom. She punctuated the enormous lie with a final, saccharine sigh and quickly hung up. I stood there, the phone pressed against my ear, long after the call had disconnected. And then the true, magnificent laughter returned. It started as a deep, silent tremor that shook my whole body, escalating into a silent roar of disbelief and dark humor. The situation was too absurd to cry over. She had performed a cheap, clumsy betrayal, talked down to me with unbearable condescension, and all to fund a pipe dream of an investment that was likely destined for spectacular collapse. But beneath the dark humor was the painful truth. 45 years of my life of unconditional devotion had been invalidated and erased by her with the casual ease of a 2-minute phone call. That was the core injury that demanded more than simple financial retrieval. I checked my bank account online, confirming the deposit of the pathetic, insulting sum. They had dumped the beach house and Robert's truck in a rush, accepting lowball offers out of sheer, frantic greed. That afternoon, I watched from my bedroom window as Angela and Edward, vibrant with oblivious excitement, loaded their expensive, excessive luggage into a waiting cab. They were laughing, kissing, making elaborate plans for a future they believed they had earned through theft. They drove off, utterly oblivious, never glancing back at the simple house that contained their mother's quiet, growing fortune. I returned to the kitchen table. I had the power to make one phone call, hire a dozen attorneys, and have everything Angela owned, including the apartment she considered her home, seized within 48 hours. But that would be quick, clean, external revenge. I realized my true purpose. I had to orchestrate an internal transformation. She had abandoned me to the illusion of poverty. I would now use the reality of my wealth to guide her through the necessary suffering. I would let her fall until she learned how to stand up without expecting a safety net. My strategy was fixed. Silent observation, silent maneuver, and ultimate shocking revelation. I reached for the phone again, not for vengeance, but for strategic deployment. The first phase of the plan required the only person capable of executing this magnificent, silent deception. Mr. Peterson. I was ready to play my part as the broken widow, while secretly initiating the complex machinery of my retribution as education. Mrs. Brooks, it's profoundly reassuring to hear your voice. I must admit, the news of Robert's passing shook me. How are you truly holding up? Mr. Peterson's voice, calm, measured, and professionally empathetic, was a grounding anchor amidst the swirling chaos of my internal plotting. I'm doing well, Mr. Peterson. Much better than you or anyone else could possibly imagine, I replied, my voice steady now, devoid of the earlier widow's tremor. But I need to see you urgently. I found some documents from Robert, documents that fundamentally change every single aspect of his estate and our current legal standing. The appointment was set for the very next morning. I dressed with meticulous care, selecting my favorite wine-colored dress, the heavy silk a reassuring weight against my skin. Robert had always called it my negotiation dress, a subtle joke about my determined nature. I fixed my salt and pepper hair, applying just enough makeup to mask the sleepless nights, but not so much that I looked opulent. When I gazed into the mirror, the image reflected back was no longer the bereaved widow. It was a woman stepping fully and deliberately into a role of powerful control, a strategist, refined and ready. Mr. Peterson's office was a monument to old money and legal precision, situated high up in a downtown skyscraper. The lobby floor was cool, polished marble, and the conference room we were ushered into smelled faintly of leather and aged paper. He greeted me warmly, but as he began to review the thick manila envelope's contents, the polite mask of professional condolences cracked wide open. He spent nearly 20 minutes meticulously cross-referencing documents, his brow furrowed in astonishment. Mrs. Brooks, this is not merely an estate. This is a complex, multi-tiered financial empire. Robert was not just a bus driver. He was running a private, low-profile investment firm through these holding corporations. The value here, it is exponentially more significant than anyone realized. It's magnificent. I understand the magnitude, Mr. Peterson. What I need to know now is not how much I own, but how absolute my control is and what legal options I possess concerning the recent fraudulent sales. He confirmed my position with immediate finality. The documents were flawless, establishing me as the sole, rightful, and silent owner of all the properties, including the massive apartment building. He then presented the option for swift public revenge. The sale of your beach house was executed under false pretenses and is entirely invalid. We can nullify it immediately, Mrs. Brooks. And furthermore, we have more than enough evidence to proceed with criminal charges against your daughter and her husband for grand larceny and wire fraud. I shook my head slowly, firmly, drawing out the moment. No, Mr. Peterson, I thank you for the legal confirmation, but I do not want legal action. Not yet. I want this handled another way, a method that requires complete and utter discretion. I want everything that Robert built to remain my secret. Can you help me manage this extraordinary and extensive deception? He leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on mine, realizing this was a client unlike any other. This was not about financial recovery, it was about strategic personal justice. Of course, Mrs. Brooks, you are my client and discretion is paramount. What precisely is the operational plan? First, I need you to quietly and efficiently nullify the fraudulent sale of the beach house. Return the full capital to the buyers without giving them any indication that I, Antonia Brooks, am the party responsible. The deed must be returned to my name as swiftly as possible. Second, and most crucially, I need you to finalize the administrative control of all the properties, especially the building where Angela and Edward currently reside. I need the direct power to issue formal notices and manage tenants, but the identity of the owner must remain the corporate name, Robert Investments, Inc. I need no one, especially Angela, to connect the new owner to the poor widow she abandoned. It will require significant legal maneuvering, Mrs. Brooks, but it is entirely feasible. I estimate 2 weeks to gain full administrative control of the rental properties, and the beach house can be secured much faster. Proceed, Mr. Peterson, and maintain absolute silence. The weeks that followed were the most emotionally exhausting of my life, a tightrope walk of high stakes deception. Officially, I was the pitiable, frail, poor widow who had been ruthlessly betrayed and left with only a minuscule bank balance. But in secret, I was the quiet owner of a substantial real estate portfolio, orchestrating the systematic reclamation of my life. My mornings were a carefully maintained performance. I woke up, drank my coffee alone, and adhered to my walking routine through the neighborhood, ensuring I was seen. This ritual allowed the neighbors, particularly my chief informant, Aurora, to witness my visible grief and destitution. Aurora, a woman who lived for the suffering of others under the guise of compassion, cornered me one afternoon while I was feigning distress over a patchy area of the front lawn. Antonia, dear, is it truly true that Angela went to Europe and left you completely alone in this big old house? Yes, Aurora, I replied, sighing dramatically, allowing my shoulders to slump. She and Edward left this afternoon. Major business opportunity, she said, very urgent. And how, dear sweetie, are you going to manage now? We all know poor Robert didn't leave much beyond his bus driver's pension. You simply can't stay here alone. Her eyes, full of genuine pity and thinly veiled satisfaction, were searching my face for any hint of breakdown. If you only knew, Aurora, I thought, smiling wanly. I'll be fine, Aurora. I'm resourceful. I'm taking things one day at a time. Well, you know where to find me if you need a casserole or perhaps a ride to the market. We all need to look out for you now. These conversations, repeated daily, a necessary reinforcement of the lie that fueled my resolve. I had to let them pity the lie so they would never suspect the magnitude of the truth. Midweek, Mr. Peterson called with the first victory. Mrs. Brooks, I have excellent news. I was able to nullify the beach house sale. The buyers were unaware of the underlying fraud and received their money back immediately. The house is legally yours again, back under the umbrella of your holding company. Excellent, Mr. Peterson. And the building where Angela resides, that one is progressing. Technically, you've always been the owner through the corporate veil, but we have almost finalized the administrative control transfer. You will have full power to issue notices and execute tenant management by the end of next week. The timing was impeccable. Just as my legal control solidified, the consequences of Angela's avarice began to catch up to her, thanks again to Aurora, the neighborhood's diligent yet unwitting informant. Antonia, Aurora gasped one morning, clutching a handful of geraniums. Did you know that Edward is in the most incredible trouble with the bank? My cousin's son works in commercial lending, and he told her they are investigating Edward for fraudulent loans. Apparently, he took out massive amounts of capital using the apartment they live in as collateral, but he never actually had the deed. Really? I asked, feigning deep shock, my hand fluttering to my chest. How could Angela be unaware of something so massive? She must be. They're saying the situation is so bad that she's going to have to return from Europe immediately. The banks are circling Antonia. It's a complete catastrophe. Edward, the worthless, smooth-talking puppet master, had not simply abandoned Angela for a younger woman. He had abandoned her to a spectacular, life-ruining debt, fleeing his own colossal mess. Angela had sacrificed her mother and her entire family legacy for a criminal, and now she was about to face the reckoning alone. The next morning, Mr. Peterson's call confirmed the gossip. Mrs. Brooks, your daughter landed at the airport an hour ago. She is completely alone. The reports indicate the argument was catastrophic and Edward has vanished. I see. Did you prepare the necessary paperwork for her imminent arrival? The eviction notice is ready. It details the corporate ownership and stipulates 30 days for her to vacate the premises, as per local statute. It is entirely legal and defensible. Good. I want you to have it delivered to her apartment today. She should receive it tomorrow, precisely as she is beginning to confront Edward's ruin and her own homelessness. I hung up the phone. The period of silent preparation was over. After weeks of careful, quiet plotting, the moment for the first decisive act had arrived. Angela was about to discover, in the most devastating and personal way possible, that the woman she thought was a weak, pitiful victim was, in fact, the one sitting silently at the very top of her world, holding the absolute power of her fate. Angela arrived back in the city on Tuesday night, slipping back into the luxury apartment she still believed was hers. Aurora, ever the vigilant neighborhood correspondent, confirmed the details. One suitcase, no Edward, and a face that looked ravaged by sleepless nights and the transatlantic flight. My daughter was back, and she was utterly broken. The stage was set for the final, necessary theatrical flourish. Mr. Peterson called the next afternoon. Mrs. Brooks, the eviction letter was successfully delivered an hour ago. The building manager confirmed Miss Brooks received the notice directly. The clock was now ticking on her 30-day countdown to homelessness, triggered by a company she would never connect to her mother. I spent that night lying awake, not with worry, but with a forensic calculation of the psychological impact. I needed her to believe, truly believe, that she was facing utter ruin alone. At precisely 8 o'clock the following morning, the phone rang, shattering the quiet routine of my kitchen. It was Angela. Her voice, having lost every trace of its former cool condescension, was raw, frantic, and desperate. Mom. Mom, I need to talk to you urgently. I received a letter yesterday. It's horrible. It says I have to vacate my apartment in 30 days. It must be a mistake, right? Some kind of elaborate scam. Please tell me you know something about this. I kept my voice perfectly even, injecting just enough confusion and concern. An eviction notice? How strange, honey. That sounds quite alarming. From whom is it? Perhaps a mistake in their paperwork. From a company I've never heard of. It's called. Wait, let me look at the signature again. Robert Investments, Inc. Mom, the name sounds so official, but who is Robert Investments? Robert had signed his final act of wisdom with a subtle, tragicomic signature. No, honey, I'm afraid I've never heard that name. It must be a massive corporation. Are you sure the letter is legitimate? You must call the number. That's what I want to find out. But Edward, he's gone, Mom. He left me in Paris. He ran off with that waitress, taking what little money was left. Now I come back to this. I don't understand what's happening, and I'm terrified. The confirmation of Edward's abandonment was complete. He had proven to be exactly the kind of opportunist Robert and I had feared. I'm so sorry, Angela. This is truly terrible. Where are you now? You must leave that place if it's causing you such distress. Come here, you need to talk to someone. You said yourself, you have no one else. The profound, aching irony settled over me like a cold wave. The moment she was utterly without the man she had betrayed me for, she remembered the mother she had callously discarded. Of course, honey, this will always be your home. You can come over whenever you need to. When Angela arrived an hour later, she was unrecognizable. Her body, usually taut and elegant, seemed diminished. Her eyes were puffy, her skin pale, and her expensive clothes looked like costumes on a woman who was actively unraveling. Her first words were a desperate, choked confession that broke through the dam of months of silent plotting. Mom, she said, her voice catching on a sob, I am so sorry for the way I left. I was cruel. I was selfish. I treated you like garbage and I took everything you had, and now I have no one to turn to. I sat her down at the kitchen table, offering a cup of tea, allowing the floodgates to open. What happened with Edward, Angela? Tell me everything. He lied about everything, Mom. The business opportunity was a complete fabrication. He only wanted the money from the house sale to clear the colossal debts he had accrued and to fund his escape with that woman. He used fraudulent documents and my forged signature to take out massive loans, using the apartment we lived in as collateral, which he never even owned. He set me up to take the fall. So, what is your next step, Angela? What will you do now? I don't know, Mom. I literally don't have money for a lawyer. Edward took the last of the cash. I'm ruined, I thought. Maybe if you could forgive me, I could stay here for a little while, just until I can find a job and rent a tiny place of my own. There it was, the ultimate moment of surrender. She, the proud woman who had cast me aside, was now begging for refuge. Of course, honey, this house is your sanctuary. It will always be your home. She looked at me with such raw, genuine surprise, a look that tore at the calculated resolve in my own heart. Really, Mom, after everything I did to you, you are my daughter, Angela. That will never change. I pulled her into a long, difficult hug. It was the hug of a mother, yes, but also of a strategic architect. This was the sanctuary she needed before the real, deep work of transformation could begin. Angela moved in the next day, bringing 2 suitcases and a box, the meager remnants of her former life. As she was going through Edward's abandoned items, she found a small, yellowed manila envelope, the backup, the insurance plan Robert had prepared. Mom, I found this among Edward's old papers. It has your name on it. Maybe he found it after Dad died and forgot to give it to you. My heart hammered. Robert's foresight was boundless. I opened the envelope in her presence. Inside was a small key and a short letter from Robert. Antonia, if you are reading this after having received the main envelope, it means our daughter is going through a difficult time. This key opens a safety deposit box at the central bank. There is something there that can help you help her, but use it wisely. With eternal love, Robert. Angela gasped, her eyes immediately lighting up with desperate hope. A safety deposit box. Oh, Mom, Dad had a treasure. Maybe there's something valuable that can help us, enough to start over. The desperation was palpable. She was clinging to any final lifeline. I knew this was the ultimate test. I had to let her expend this last remaining, tangible asset of her father's legacy. I didn't know about this, Angela. Your father kept so many secrets. Okay, I said, after a calculated pause, we can go to the bank tomorrow. At the central bank, the employee led us to the vault. When box 247 was opened, it revealed glistening jewels, antique rings, diamond necklaces, pearl strands, a substantial collection valued at approximately $200,000. Mom, this is it. We're saved, Angela cried, her relief a fragile thing. We can sell the emerald necklace and the diamond ring. With this money, you could hire a good lawyer to get the beach house back, and I could pay off the most urgent of Edward's debts. This was the pivotal moment. Was her first instinct still to save herself from Edward's consequences, or had she recognized the sacred nature of the family legacy? Are you sure, Angela? Are you absolutely certain you want to use your father's final, secret inheritance, the last physical memory he left for us, to pay the debts of the man who betrayed you both? What other option do I have, Mom? She pleaded, tears welling up again. If I don't pay something soon, the banks are going to foreclose on everything. My name is ruined. I have no job, no credit, and now no home. I have to sell this to survive. It's the only honorable thing I can do. I watched her for days, agonizing over the jewels, meticulously calculating which pieces to sacrifice. It was excruciating to watch her reduce decades of family history to a desperately needed financial transaction. She sold the majority of the collection for $180,000. She was forced to pay the price of her own catastrophic choices, dollar by dollar, with the very sacrifice her father had intended to spare her from. She was finally hitting rock bottom, and only from this lowest, most desperate point could the true, sincere rebuilding begin. Over the next 2 weeks, the silence in our home was replaced by the low hum of genuine effort and struggle. I watched Angela relentlessly search for work. She went out every morning, impeccably dressed despite her financial ruin, returning in the evenings exhausted, her face a mask of disappointment. The legal problems, the looming eviction, the credit disaster caused by Edward's fraud made every standard job application an automatic dead end. Mom, I went to 3 job interviews today, she confessed one evening, sinking onto the sofa, her posture defeated. 2 of them cited the pending legal actions as an immediate disqualifier. The third, The third offered me a part-time job cleaning offices, at night, minimum wage. Are you going to take it, honey? I asked, my voice soft, but my heart watching her carefully for the final, critical decision. She met my gaze, and for the first time in years, I saw not entitlement, but raw, stripped down necessity. I have no choice, Mom. I must. It pays very little, but it's something. And I can work at night so I can keep looking for something better during the day. I can't keep being a financial burden to you. It's bad enough that I'm living here for free, consuming your resources. Seeing my daughter, who had spent decades living a life of utter luxury, preparing to scrub floors for minimum wage, was simultaneously the most painful and the most rewarding outcome of my plan. She was finally facing reality without expecting any magical intervention. That night, before her first shift, I watched her dress. She wore cheap, functional work clothes, a stark contrast to the expensive fabrics she had arrived in. There was a new, humble dignity in the way she moved. When she returned the next morning, close to dawn, she was physically exhausted, her muscles aching, but her spirit was strangely renewed. "How was your first day?" I asked, handing her a large mug of tea. "Hard, Mom, genuinely hard, but I met some people. I met a woman there, Mrs. Johnson. She's 60 years old and has been cleaning offices for 2 decades. She told me she started after her husband left her with 3 small children and zero savings. She said it's not the job she dreamed of, but that it bought her independence and dignity. She sounds like a wise woman. She is. She said something that stuck with me. She told me there are 2 types of people who end up doing this job, the ones who never had opportunities and the ones who had them and ruined them. She asked me quite directly which group I was in. And what was your reply, Angela? I told her the absolute truth. That I had all the opportunities in the world, a loving family, a stable home, and a future, and that I ruined it all by following a worthless, lying man. She laughed, Mom, a loud, genuine laugh, and said, "Well, honey, then at least you know exactly why you're here." That self-knowledge puts you one step ahead of most people. That conversation marked a profound shift. The self-pity began to recede, replaced by a nascent form of self-respect. She was earning her own bread, and the value of that effort was redefining her worth. During this period, Aurora continued her routine visits. One afternoon, while Angela was resting before her night shift, Aurora sat with me in the kitchen, drinking tea and observing the change in the house's atmosphere. "Antonia, I have to confess something to you," Aurora said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "At first, when Angela came back, I felt pity for her, but lately I've been watching her. She looks different, Antonia. Not just sad, but humble. She carries herself with a strange sort of dignity, even when she's leaving for that cleaning job. Life is a difficult teacher, Aurora. Yes, but you, Antonia, you've been the wisest mother I've ever seen. Many of us thought you would never forgive her, or that you would simply give her a large check to solve the problem, but you let her struggle. And now she values you not just as a mother, but as the strong, stable force she abandoned." Aurora had touched the heart of my entire strategy. The emotional groundwork was complete. Angela had acknowledged her failures, confessed her sins, and found dignity in her own effort. Mr. Peterson's call the next morning was the signal I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Brooks, I have excellent news. The legal process is complete. We secured enough irrefutable evidence of Edward's fraud and coercion. The courts have absolved your daughter of all his debts. She is completely free of that burden. It was time. After weeks of calculated silence, the grand revelation, the culmination of Robert's foresight and my strategy was due. Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice firm, "I want you to schedule a meeting. It's time for my daughter to know the whole magnificent truth." The meeting was arranged for Friday morning in Mr. Peterson's imposing office. I told Angela I had made an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in consumer debt relief, omitting the crucial details. She was anxious about the cost, emphasizing that she couldn't afford any fees. "Mom, I don't have money to pay a lawyer," she fretted as we rode the bus downtown. I've barely saved enough from my night job to cover my share of the groceries. I'm afraid to ask you for anything more. Don't worry about that now, honey. Let's just listen to what he has to say. Sometimes advice is more valuable than money. We arrived at the elegant building. Angela was visibly intimidated by the marble and the glass. Mr. Peterson ushered us into his conference room, greeting Angela with grave courtesy. Miss Brooks, he began, before we discuss fees, I need you to review these documents. He handed her the first thick folder containing the meticulously compiled evidence of Edward's fraud and the legal motions I had financed. Angela opened it, her eyes scanning the complex legal jargon. Her expression changed from apprehension to profound disbelief. I don't understand, she stammered, pointing at a document. These papers say Edward forged my signature, that there is proof of criminal fraud, and that I am completely absolved of these enormous debts. But who paid for this investigation? I couldn't afford this team or this level of legal expertise. Mr. Peterson looked deliberately at me. It was my cue. I let the silence hang for a long, heavy moment before I spoke. Angela, I began, my voice clear and steady. There is something I needed you to understand before this day arrived, something your father and I kept secret for decades, something that fundamentally changes who I am and who you are. What, Mom? She whispered, staring at me, the debt papers slipping from her grasp. Mr. Peterson, please show her the rest of the documents. He handed her the second, much thicker folder. This contained the property deeds, the corporate ownership certificates, the detailed bank statements showing the millions in assets, and the deed to the 20-story apartment building. Angela read in silence for what seemed like an hour. Her face went through an entire spectrum of human emotion: confusion, white-hot shock, staggering comprehension, and finally, a devastating, tragic realization. Mom, this says you are the sole owner of the building where I lived, that you have 6 other properties, multiple corporate accounts, millions in investments. Her voice was a strained gasp. Yes, honey, this means. When I sold the beach house, it was your house. The sale was illegal. The money I stole from you was a fraction of the fortune you were hiding. I already nullified the sale of the beach house, Angela. It's back in the family. There was a silence so absolute it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Angela closed the folders, her hands shaking violently. She looked directly into my eyes, her own eyes streaming with tears of shame and realization. Why, Mom? She asked, the question laced with agony and confusion. Why did you let me suffer? Why did you let me think I was ruined? Let me sell Dad's jewels? Let me take a cleaning job when you knew you could have solved every single one of my problems with a single phone call? This was the final, critical hurdle. This was the moment I had orchestrated the last 6 months to achieve. Because, Angela, you needed to learn something you couldn't learn any other way. I did not let you suffer out of cruelty. I let you suffer out of necessary love. What did I need to learn? You needed to learn the genuine value of the things you had cast aside, the value of family, the dignity of your own effort, and the profound importance of respect. When you abandoned me, it wasn't just money you took. It was my dignity, my trust, and my unconditional love. If I had simply given you the money, you would have learned nothing except that you always have a wealthy mother to bail you out. I didn't save you by giving you money so you could keep making the same mistakes. I saved you by letting you hit rock bottom so you could finally learn how to save yourself. Angela completely broke down, collapsing forward onto the massive desk, her sobs racking her thin body. But these were not the tears of self-pity she had shed before. They were tears of deep, painful understanding. Mr. Peterson discreetly confirmed again, Miss Brooks, your mother has personally settled all legal expenses to free you from Edward's debt. You are financially and legally free. You are wealthy. And the cleaning job I got, she asked, lifting her tear-stained face. You can quit immediately, Angela, I said, but I sincerely hope you don't. That job taught you the value of your own effort, the dignity of honest work, and the importance of valuing every dollar you earn. Those are the values that truly constitute wealth. Angela wiped her eyes, taking a long moment to compose herself. She looked at me, and in that gaze, I finally saw not the spoiled daughter, but the woman who had truly learned her lesson. Do you forgive me, Mom? I forgave you a long time ago, honey, the moment I chose this path. The question is, can you forgive yourself for what you did? I don't know if I can, she admitted truthfully. I did unforgivable things, but I will spend the rest of my life proving that the woman who returned from Europe is not the woman who will live here now. We left Mr. Peterson's office with a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer bound by obligation. We were two women who had consciously chosen each other, bound by a shared, difficult truth. The weeks that followed were devoted to rebuilding, but not the expected kind. Angela decided to keep her night cleaning job for a period. Mom, I need to finish what I started, she insisted. I need to earn the money to repair the few things I ruined. I cannot just go back to an easy life. 6 months later, she was accepted into a rigorous master's program in social work, paid for with the savings from her minimum wage job. She was determined to use her experience of financial ruin and betrayal to help others. That summer, we drove back to the beach house. Mom, Angela said, standing on the porch Robert built, I have a proposal. I want us to use part of Dad's fortune to establish a foundation to help women who are leaving situations of domestic violence and financial abandonment. We can turn this beach house into a temporary shelter, a sanctuary where they can rebuild their lives from zero. It was the perfect proposal. Robert would have loved the idea that his secret wealth and his sanctuary would be used to help women find the dignity Angela had fought so hard to regain. I think that is the most beautiful idea, honey, I said, putting my arm around her. The best sanctuaries are the ones that are shared. Your father always taught me that a house isn't truly a home until it opens its doors to other people who desperately need love and a safe place to stand. That night, Angela and I sat on the porch looking at the stars. Do you know what this entire experience taught me, Mom? She asked, her voice quiet. Edward told me what I wanted to hear. He made me feel special without effort. You, Mom, you taught me what I needed to learn. You taught me that true wealth comes from hard work, self-respect, and genuine, earned relationships. You taught me the hardest lesson, and it saved me. I looked up at the quiet sky, thinking of Robert. We did it, my love. We saved her. Justice had arrived not as revenge, but as profound education, not as punishment, but as transformation. And in the end, we had both gained something immeasurably more valuable than money. An authentic, strong relationship built on a foundation of mutual respect.